Well, welcome back, everyone. Well, you rarely hear me say this, but please, for the next 5 minutes, don't go anywhere. This is a very important interview. Joining me today is Janine Stuchin. Now, she's the Executive Director of the Prevention Council in Saratoga County. And Janine's joining us today to talk about NARCAN, about opioid addiction, and some of the reasons it happens, and some of the things that we can do as members of the community to help those who might be addicted or might be facing issues concerning this. So, Janine, thanks for coming in.
Sure, my pleasure.
Very nice to have you here. Now, you're the Executive Director of the Prevention Council. Now, in that role, I'm sure you see everything. And recently, we've been covering the issues related to NARCAN.
Yes.
Tell us what NARCAN is.
Sure. NARCAN is medication that's available for the general public to have on them to help someone who's going through an opioid overdose. And it can be administrated much like someone having a heart attack. Many of us in the community know how to do CPR. The administration of NARCAN to someone in an opioid overdose situation can be addressed and can be life-saving.
Yes, I've got you. Now, we're going to cycle back as to how you can actually participate. But before we do that, Janine and I were talking about the different ways that people become addicted. Some of it has to do with your age group. Let's start with teens.
Sure. The concern with teens is it isn't always the direct onset of opioid use, but early experimentation with marijuana and alcohol during the early teen years can indicate mental, emotional health concerns for that young person that they're seeking to address and through self-medication. That would be an early risk factor for opioid use. Got you.
Now, again, let's talk about the emotional state of a teen. They're curious. They tend to want to explore, right?
Absolutely.
So that plays into it.
Absolutely. It's not just an expression that teens are reckless or maybe haven't thought through their decisions. Literally, their brain hasn't fully developed. And that's something that researchers have learned much over the past few decades is adolescent brain development, and how much more dangerous it is for young people, for teens, or almost anyone under the age of 25, to be experimenting with substances and alcohol because of the detrimental effect on their developing brain.
Now, you know, as a parent of a teen, maybe a grandparent of a teen, an aunt or an uncle, you know, we tend to think that the teen's brain is as developed as an adult's brain, and it just isn't. And that's triggering this curiosity or this sense of exploring. I mean, think about yourself when we were teens, right? Moving on, you get into the adult years. And what triggers the addictions most often?
Regrettably, what we've seen with this recent opioid epidemic has been what is now being perceived and recently recognized even at the federal level is overprescribing. And we've seen addictions develop in populations that historically we have not seen. Middle-aged professionals who might be roofers or carpenters having workplace-related injuries and being prescribed opioids and not being monitored. We see young people who might be having oral surgery, wisdom teeth removed, and still to this day being prescribed opioids as part of their post-operation treatment. And that really is coming into question because of these populations getting ready access to opioids. And now we have a much better understanding of how addictive they are and how other medications may be more appropriate for for treatment after accidents, for treatment after surgery, oral surgery, sports injuries. These are some of the ways that people unintended have been exposed to opioids and subsequently have developed addictions.
I've got you. You know, we happen to live in this pain-free society, right? So, and I've experienced it myself with a doctor many years ago. All of a sudden, I found myself with a prescription for opioids, and I thought to myself, my God, what am I going to do with all these? You know, and that was just a trend for so many years, but that trend is starting to change, right?
I think we're really reaching a regrettable peak or maybe a very low.
Right.
I think in recent weeks we've really seen from the federal level down to the state level an awareness that we cannot keep the prescribing of opioids at the rate that we've been as a society without the monitoring. And we also need to address what do we do with all these prescriptions that are out there. And in Saratoga County, we've come up with some better solutions. The Sheriff's Office in Ballston Spa and the Saratoga Springs Police Department in Saratoga Springs have 24-hour, 7 days a
Hotlines.
week collection boxes
Oh,
where you
right,
can
right.
bring your medications. If you or a family member have any prescriptions, it doesn't have to be simply opioids, have medications that you want to get out of your house so it doesn't fall in the hands of somebody else, that's very important to know. You can drop them off, no questions asked, and they have these boxes there at both the sheriff's and the Saratoga County Police.
One thing I want to try to remind you now, opioids, that's a classification, of course. The most frequent ones you hear about are like oxycodone, hydrocodone, codeine. Here's something that I just want you to think about, that any of these pills are heroin in a pill. If you start to think about it that way, you can understand some of the potential risks involved with this, because the transition from opioids to heroin today is so easy. Heroin is plentiful, it's cheap, and all of a sudden, to avoid pain or the receptors in your brain, of course.
Exactly. At that point, you have a chronic addiction. You have a disease.
That's right.
And it's a disease of the brain. And it's a very challenging position for someone to be in.
Right. Now, the pendulum is starting to change, swing the other way. Awareness for what opioids do is part of that. This NARCAN program is part of that. So let's cycle back on that. The pendulum's just not going to stop. People just don't get off opioids, right? So tell us about this pendulum.
So absolutely, we hope that in the coming months there will be more restrictions on the prescribing and just the availability throughout the community of these opioids. And we have the NARCAN training. We need increased treatment facilities throughout the region. In Saratoga County right now, we don't have an ambulatory detox facility. That's something that's needed. And we have had changes in the insurance availability for treatment, which is important, and we need to connect with people and let them know that it doesn't have to end with death, that there is hope, that treatment is possible, and people can go on to live with this, but live with it in a manageable way.
Right. Now, for anyone who thinks that NARCAN is a crutch, that's a mistake. Because the whole idea that any of us should go to attend one of these classes, that you can find out by going to the Prevention Council website, that, you know, we all should have an understanding of this. It's like CPR. Right?
Absolutely. We don't just say, oh, somebody who lives with someone who has heart disease should know CPR.
Right.
We recognize that across the board, as Good Samaritans, we should be available if we can save a life. Got you.
Now, there are many educational sessions and classes, and again, go to the website and you can find out where they are and encourage you to participate.
They're free.
They're free, right, got you. And the sense there is that it isn't a crutch, it's a way to keep someone alive if the risk factor has gotten to that critical point where they're overdosing and they're probably going to die.
Absolutely.
Right, I mean, this
need to keep them alive if we want to get them into treatment.
Yes, yes, I've got you. Well, thank you so much for coming in. We covered a lot in this amount of time.
Thank you.
I'm really grateful. And please, like I said, you know, you are in a situation where you think that someone may be addicted to opioids. It's a path that they're taking. Stop them, get help, and see if we can turn this or get this pendulum to swing a little faster in the other direction. Thank you very much for coming in, Janine.
Thank you.
To see this interview again, you can head to our website, looktvonline.com.